The beautiful game, a journey against all odds. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty field behind the Martinez family's modest home in San Miguel, a small town where dreams often seemed as distant as the mountains on the horizon. 8-year-old Diego Martinez stood at barely 4 feet tall, his thin frame almost lost in his oversized soccer jersey, a hand-me-down from his older brother Carlos. His ribs showed through his skin like delicate ridges, and his legs looked like twigs that might snap with the slightest contact. But what Diego lacked in size, he made up for with the brightest smile anyone had ever seen and eyes that sparkled with an inexplicable hope. "Diego, come inside for breakfast," his mother Elena called from the kitchen window. Her voice carried both love and concern as she watched her youngest son kick a worn-out ball against the concrete wall, again and again, with a persistence that both amazed and worried her. Diego's father, Roberto, emerged from the house carrying his construction tools, ready for another long day of manual labor. He paused to watch his son, remembering his own childhood dreams of playing soccer professionally, dreams that had been crushed by poverty and circumstances. Roberto had been a talented player in his youth, but life had other plans. Now, watching Diego's determination, he felt a mixture of pride and fear. Pride for his son's spirit, fear for the heartbreak that might follow. "Mijo," Roberto called gently, "remember what I told you about keeping your eye on the ball? Focus, concentrate. The ball is your friend, but only if you treat it with respect." Diego nodded enthusiastically, his smile never wavering. Despite his father's encouragement, the boy struggled with focus. His mind wandered constantly, to the clouds shaped like animals, to the birds singing in the trees, to the older kids playing across the street who seemed so much more skilled and confident than he could ever hope to be. The real challenge came every afternoon when Diego joined the neighborhood pickup games. The other boys ranged from 12 to 16 years old, their bodies already showing signs of adolescent strength and coordination that made Diego look like a lost puppy among wolves. They weren't cruel, but they weren't particularly welcoming either. Diego was often the last picked, if picked at all, and when he did play, he was relegated to positions where he could do the least damage, usually as a substitute goalkeeper or playing defense where his lack of speed and strength were less noticeable. "Why do you even bother, Pequeño?" asked Miguel, a 15-year-old with the build of someone who had been eating well all his life. "You're too small, too weak. Maybe you should try chess or something." The words stung, but Diego's smile never faltered. "I just love playing," he would respond, his voice small but steady. "And maybe someday I'll be good enough to play with you properly." The older boys would laugh, not maliciously, but with the casual dismissiveness that teenagers show toward children who seem to be reaching for impossible dreams. They couldn't see what Roberto saw in his son's eyes, an unquenchable fire that burned despite every obstacle. After particularly difficult games where Diego barely touched the ball, he would return home dejected but never defeated. His brother Carlos, now 17 and working part-time at the local market, would find him in their shared bedroom, staring at the ceiling with that perpetual smile that somehow looked sad around the edges. "Hermano," Carlos would say, settling onto the creaky bed they shared, "I've been thinking. You know how you love watching those soccer videos on my phone? Maybe we should watch them together and I can explain some things." Carlos had been a decent player himself before work responsibilities took over his life. He understood the game's intricacies in ways that Diego, despite his passion, didn't yet grasp. Their evening sessions became a ritual. After dinner, when the dishes were cleared and homework was finished, the two brothers would huddle together, watching grainy YouTube videos of professional matches on Carlos's old smartphone. "See how Messi positions himself?" Carlos would explain, pointing at the small screen. "He's not the biggest or strongest, but watch his first touch. See how he controls the ball with the inside of his foot? And look at his balance. He's always ready to go in any direction." Diego absorbed every word like a sponge. He studied the way Messi moved, how he seemed to dance with the ball rather than fight it. He watched how the Argentine player used his low center of gravity as an advantage, how he anticipated opponents' movements, how he turned his smaller stature into a weapon of agility and precision. "Can you show me?" Diego would ask eagerly. "Tomorrow," Carlos would promise. "After I get home from work, we'll practice in the backyard." True to his word, Carlos spent his free evenings teaching Diego the fundamentals. They started with basic ball control, keeping the ball close using both feet, developing a soft touch. Carlos demonstrated how to receive a pass, how to turn with the ball, how to protect it from defenders using body positioning rather than strength. "You're never going to overpower anyone, Diego," Carlos explained patiently. "But you can outthink them. Use your brain, use your speed, use the fact that you're closer to the ground. Make those advantages work for you." Roberto watched these sessions from the kitchen window, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude for Carlos's dedication to his younger brother. One evening, he joined them outside. "I've been thinking," Roberto said, settling onto an overturned crate that served as their makeshift bench. "Diego, your problem isn't skill, you're getting better every day. Your problem is that you try to play like them," he gestured toward the house where the older boys lived. "But you're not them. You're you. And maybe that's exactly what you need to be." Roberto began sharing stories from his own playing days, describing techniques and strategies that smaller players could use to compete with larger opponents. He taught Diego about spatial awareness, about reading the game several moves ahead, about using deception and change of pace to create opportunities. "In soccer, the mind is more important than the body," Roberto would say. "A smart player who thinks 2 steps ahead will always beat a strong player who thinks only about right now." Slowly, Diego's understanding of the game deepened. He began to see patterns in the chaos of the neighborhood matches. He noticed how certain players telegraphed their movements, how others had predictable habits, how the flow of the game created opportunities for those patient enough to wait for them. But knowledge and understanding were only part of the equation. Diego's physical limitations remained a constant challenge. 9 years old, he still weighed barely 60 pounds, and his growth seemed to lag behind his peers by months, sometimes years. His mother worried constantly about his health, taking him to the local clinic whenever she could afford it. "He's healthy, doctor," Morales assured Elena during one of these visits. "Just small for his age. Some children develop differently." Make sure he eats well, gets enough protein when you can manage it, and give him time. Sometimes the late bloomers surprise everyone. Elena did her best with their limited resources. She worked extra hours cleaning houses in the wealthier part of town, using the additional income to buy milk, eggs, and occasionally meat for Diego's meals. Roberto took on weekend construction jobs, his hands becoming permanently stained with concrete and calloused from carrying materials that seemed too heavy for one man to bear. Despite their efforts, Diego remained thin and small, but his skills continued to improve. The hours spent with Carlos, the videos they analyzed together, the patient instruction from Roberto, all of it began to show results. Diego's first touch became cleaner, his passes more accurate, his understanding of positioning more sophisticated. The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon in late spring. Diego was 10 years old, still undersized but now possessing a technical proficiency that the older boys couldn't ignore. The neighborhood game was particularly competitive that day, with players from two different streets facing off in what had become a weekly rivalry. As usual, Diego was picked last and assigned to play left midfield for the weaker team. The game was physical and fast-paced, with the older boys using their strength and speed to dominate possession. Diego barely touched the ball in the first 20 minutes, but he watched and waited, applying everything his father and brother had taught him about patience and positioning. Then, in the 35th minute, opportunity arrived. The opposing team's right back, a stocky 14-year-old named Joaquin, received a pass near the sideline. He was known for his powerful kicks but also for his tendency to take heavy touches when pressured. Diego had noticed this habit during previous games. Moving quietly into position, Diego timed his approach perfectly. As Joaquin prepared to advance up the field with his characteristic heavy touch, Diego stepped in and cleanly dispossessed him with a perfectly timed tackle. The ball rolled free and Diego was onto it instantly. What happened next surprised everyone, including Diego himself. Instead of looking to pass immediately as he usually did, he began to dribble. Using the skills he'd practiced countless hours in his backyard, he evaded Joaquin's desperate attempt to recover possession. His low center of gravity and quick feet allowed him to change direction sharply, leaving the bigger boy off balance. Two more defenders converged on him, but Diego had anticipated this. He'd watched Messi do this same move dozens of times on Carlos's phone. A quick feint to the right, followed by a subtle shift of weight to the left, and suddenly he was past both defenders, running toward goal with only the goalkeeper to beat. The entire field fell silent except for the sound of Diego's feet on the packed earth and his rapid breathing. He could hear his heart pounding in his ears as he approached the penalty area. The goalkeeper, a tall boy with long arms, came off his line aggressively, trying to cut down the angle. Diego remembered his father's words about patience and thinking ahead. Instead of shooting immediately, he waited. The goalkeeper committed himself, diving to his right to cover what seemed like the most obvious shot placement. But Diego had anticipated this too. With a delicate touch, he lifted the ball over the diving keeper and watched it nestle into the far corner of the goal. For a moment, nobody moved. Then erupted the chaos of celebration from Diego's teammates and grudging respect from his opponents. As his teammates mobbed him, Diego looked toward his house and saw Roberto standing at the fence, his face beaming with pride and tears streaming down his cheeks. That goal changed everything. Not because it was spectacular, though it was beautiful in its simplicity, but because it demonstrated to everyone, including Diego himself, that he belonged on that field. The older boys began to see him not as a charity case but as a legitimate player who could contribute to their games. Word of Diego's performance spread quickly through the small community. Parents who had watched the game told their friends, and soon people began to take notice of the small boy with the big smile who played soccer with a maturity beyond his years. Among those who heard the stories was Coach Hernandez, who ran the youth soccer program at the local community center. Eduardo Hernandez had played professionally in the lower divisions before an injury ended his career and led him to coaching. He had an eye for talent and a particular soft spot for underdogs. "I heard about your son," Coach Hernandez told Roberto one evening when he stopped by their house. "Would you be interested in having him try out for our under-12 team?" Roberto's heart leaped, but he tried to remain calm. "Diego would love that," he said carefully. "But I have to be honest with you, we can't afford registration fees or equipment." Coach Hernandez waved dismissively. "Don't worry about that now. I've seen enough kids over the years to know that the ones who want it most are often the ones who can afford it least. Let's see what the boy can do first." The tryout was scheduled for the following Saturday. Diego could hardly contain his excitement throughout the week, but Roberto could see the nervousness building in his son's eyes as the day approached. This would be different from the neighborhood games. This would be organized soccer with real rules, real expectations, and real consequences. "Remember what we've practiced," Roberto told Diego the night before the tryout. "Play your game, not theirs. Show them your vision, your touch, your understanding. Don't try to be something you're not." Carlos had taken the morning off work to attend the tryout, a sacrifice that wasn't lost on Diego. As they walked to the community center, the whole family together, Diego's nervousness transformed into determination. Whatever happened, he would give everything he had. Tryout was more structured than anything Diego had experienced. Coach Hernandez divided the 30-some boys into groups and put them through a series of drills designed to test different aspects of their game. Ball control, passing accuracy, shooting, defensive positioning, physical fitness, every element was evaluated and graded. Diego's physical limitations were immediately apparent. In the sprint tests, he finished near the back of the pack. In the jumping and strength exercises, he couldn't compete with boys who were taller and had hit growth spurts. But when the ball was introduced, something magical happened. His first touch was consistently clean. His passes were weighted perfectly, arriving at teammates' feet with the right pace and spin. In the small-sided scrimmages, he demonstrated an understanding of space and timing that impressed the coach. Most importantly, he never stopped smiling, never showed frustration when things went wrong, and constantly encouraged his teammates. After 2 hours of evaluation, Coach Hernandez gathered all the boys together. Diego stood with his family, trying to read the coach's expression for any hint of the decision to come. I want to thank all of you for coming out today, Coach Hernandez began. You all showed heart and effort, and that's the most important thing. Over the next few days, I'll be calling families to let them know about roster decisions. The waiting was agony. Diego tried to maintain his usual optimism, but doubt crept in during quiet moments. Had he been good enough? Were his skills sufficient to overcome his physical limitations? Would his family's financial situation be a factor? Call came on Tuesday evening. Roberto answered the phone with a neutral expression that gradually transformed into joy as he listened to Coach Hernandez's words. Diego, Roberto said after hanging up, his voice thick with emotion, you made the team. The celebration that followed was one of the happiest moments in the Martinez family's life. Elena cried, Carlos lifted Diego off the ground in a bear hug, and Roberto looked toward the ceiling with gratitude. For whatever forces had blessed his son with this opportunity. But making the team was only the beginning. Diego's first official practice revealed just how much work lay ahead. The other players were not only bigger and stronger, they had been playing organized soccer for years. They understood complex tactical concepts, knew how to move as a unit, and possessed a level of technical skill that came from professional instruction. Diego felt overwhelmed during that first session. Pace was faster, the expectations higher, and the margin for error smaller than anything he'd experienced in neighborhood games. When Coach Hernandez called for a water break halfway through practice, Diego was breathing hard and questioning whether he truly belonged. Feeling out of place? Asked a voice beside him. Diego turned to see Alejandro, the team's captain and best player, a 12-year-old who looked more like 14 and played with the confidence of someone much older. A little, Diego admitted, his honesty a refreshing change from the bravado most new players tried to project. Good, Alejandro said with a grin. If you weren't feeling that way, it would mean you weren't paying attention. This is different from street soccer. But Coach saw something in you and he doesn't make mistakes about these things. Alejandro's acceptance meant everything to Diego. As the weeks passed, the older boy became a mentor, helping Diego understand the tactical nuances of organized soccer and showing him how to use his unique skills within the team's system. Coach Hernandez proved to be exactly the right teacher for Diego. Rather than trying to change the boy's natural style, he worked to enhance Diego's existing strengths while gradually addressing his weaknesses. He taught Diego how to use his low center of gravity in defensive situations, how to find pockets of space in crowded midfields, and how to make his passing ability a weapon that could unlock opposing defenses. Diego, the coach explained during an individual session, your greatest asset isn't your speed or your strength. It's your brain. You see things developing before they happen. That's a gift that can't be taught, only refined. The refinement process was intense. Diego practiced with the team 3 times per week and spent additional hours working on individual skills with Carlos and Roberto. His father had become his unofficial fitness coach, designing simple exercises that could be done at home to improve Diego's strength and endurance without requiring expensive equipment. We don't have a gym, Roberto would say, but we have stairs. We don't have weights, but we have water jugs. We don't have a running track, but we have streets. Everything you need is around us if we're creative enough to see it. Under this regimen, Diego's body slowly began to change. He remained small for his age, but his muscles became more defined, his endurance improved, and his coordination sharpened. More importantly, his confidence grew with each successful practice, each compliment from Coach Hernandez, each moment when his teammates looked to him for creative solutions on the field. The team's first competitive match arrived in October. Diego had been penciled in as a substitute, which disappointed him but didn't surprise him. He understood that earning a starting position would take time and consistent performance. The match was against a team from a wealthier district, boys who wore matching equipment and warm-up gear that probably cost more than Diego's family spent on groceries in a month. Their coach was a former professional player, and their tactical organization was immediately apparent. Diego watched from the bench as his team struggled to cope with the opponent's pressure and pace. By halftime, they were trailing 2-0, and several of his teammates showed signs of frustration and fatigue. "Diego," Coach Hernandez called as the second half was about to begin, "you're going in for Marco. I want you to play behind Alejandro, look for spaces between their lines, and don't be afraid to take risks with your passing." Diego's heart pounded as he trotted onto the field, but the familiar feel of grass beneath his feet and the ball at his disposal calmed his nerves. This was where he belonged, where all those hours of practice and all those dreams converged into reality. The impact was almost immediate. Diego's vision and technical ability provided a different dimension to his team's attack. He found spaces that the older boys had missed, delivered passes that unlocked defensive formations, and pressed the opposing players with an intelligence that disrupted their rhythm. In the 67th minute, Diego collected a pass in the center circle with two defenders approaching. Instead of playing safely back to his defense, he spotted Alejandro making a run down the left flank. Pass required perfect weight and timing, too soft and the defenders would intercept, too hard and it would run out of bounds. Diego struck the ball with the inside of his right foot, sending it curling around the first defender and arriving at Alejandro's feet just as he reached full stride. Alejandro cut in beat his marker and scored with a low shot into the far corner. Comeback was on. Diego's team pressed forward with renewed energy, and their young playmaker continued to find creative solutions to the opponent's defensive setup. In the 83rd minute, Diego won a corner kick with a clever piece of skill that left the opposing right back sprawled on the turf. Taking the corner himself, Diego delivered a perfectly weighted ball to the near post, where Alejandro rose above two defenders to head home the equalizer. The celebration was ecstatic, with Diego disappearing under a pile of teammates who finally fully appreciated what their smallest player brought to the team. The match ended 2-2, but Diego's performance had established him as a regular starter. Coach Hernandez pulled him aside after the game with a smile that conveyed more pride than words could express. "That," the coach said simply, "is why I knew you belonged on this team." As the season progressed, Diego's reputation grew throughout the local soccer community. Parents from opposing teams would point him out to their children as an example of what determination and intelligence could accomplish. Other coaches began to take notice of the small boy who played with such maturity and vision. But success brought new challenges. With higher expectations came increased pressure, and Diego sometimes found himself pressing too hard to create magical moments instead of playing the simple, effective soccer that had made him successful. There were games where he tried to do too much, matches where his desire to prove himself led to poor decisions and frustrated teammates. "You're trying to win every game by yourself," Carlos observed after a particularly difficult performance where Diego had attempted numerous spectacular passes that didn't come off. "Remember what Papa always says, soccer is a team sport. Your job isn't to be the hero. Your job is to make everyone else better." The reminder was perfectly timed. In the following match, Diego focused on simplicity and teamwork rather than individual brilliance. He made short, accurate passes, created space for teammates, and pressed defensively with discipline and intelligence. The result was one of the team's best performances of the season, a 4-1 victory in which Diego registered 2 assists without attempting a single spectacular play. Coach Hernandez used this performance as a teaching moment for the entire team. "This is what mature soccer looks like," he told them during the following practice. Diego could have tried to dribble past 5 players or attempted impossible passes to show off his skill. Instead, he played for the team, made smart decisions, and helped us control the game. That's the difference between a good player and a smart player. The season culminated with the regional tournament, where teams from throughout the province would compete for the championship. Diego's team had performed well enough during the regular season to earn a spot, but they were considered significant underdogs against the established powerhouse clubs from larger cities. Tournament format was unforgiving, single elimination with no second chances for teams that fell short. Diego's team was drawn against the defending champions in the quarterfinals, a matchup that many observers considered a foregone conclusion. The night before the match, Diego lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with possibilities and scenarios. Roberto sat on the edge of the bed, recognizing the signs of pre-game anxiety in his son. "Tell me what you're thinking about," Roberto said gently. "What if I'm not good enough?" Diego whispered. "What if tomorrow everyone realizes that I'm just a small kid who got lucky?" Roberto was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "Mijo, do you remember when you scored that first goal in the neighborhood game? Do you remember how it felt?" Diego nodded. "That feeling didn't come from luck," Roberto continued. "It came from thousands of hours of practice, from watching videos with Carlos, from learning to see the game differently than everyone else. Tomorrow, you won't suddenly forget everything you've learned or lose everything you've worked for. You'll be the same player who earned his spot on this team, the same boy who sees opportunities that others miss." The conversation continued for another hour, with Roberto sharing stories from his own playing days and reminding Diego of all the obstacles he'd already overcome. By the time his father said goodnight, Diego felt calmer and more confident. The match itself was a classic David versus Goliath encounter. The defending champions arrived with professional warm-up gear, expensive equipment, and an air of superiority that was immediately apparent. Their coach was a former national team player, and their tactical organization was superior to anything Diego's team had faced. For the first 30 minutes, the match unfolded exactly as expected. champions controlled possession, created the better chances, and took a 1-0 lead through a well-worked set piece that highlighted their superior size and athleticism. But Diego's team had something that couldn't be measured in height or weight. They had heart, unity, and a small playmaker who refused to be intimidated by reputations or expectations. As the match progressed, Diego began to find space between the opponent's lines, his movement and vision creating problems for defenders who had prepared for a more straightforward physical contest. The equalizer came in the 58th minute through a moment of pure soccer intelligence. Diego received the ball 30 yards from goal with 3 defenders surrounding him. Instead of forcing a pass or attempting to dribble through traffic, he simply touched the ball sideways to Alejandro and immediately began running toward goal. The movement was so subtle that the defenders didn't react until it was too late. Alejandro, understanding his teammates' intention perfectly, waited for the defenders to commit to Diego's run before sliding a perfect pass behind the defense. Diego collected the ball in stride and finished calmly past the advancing goalkeeper. The celebration was joyous but brief. There was still work to be done. The defending champions responded to the setback with increased aggression and pressure, forcing Diego's team to defend deeper and work harder for every touch of the ball. In the 77th minute, disaster struck. Alejandro, the team's captain and best player, went down with what appeared to be a serious ankle injury. As he was helped off the field, the weight of expectation shifted entirely to Diego's shoulders. He was now the team's primary creative force, the player who would need to produce something special if they were to advance. Pressure was immense, but Diego embraced it rather than shrinking from it. In the final 10 minutes of regulation time, he was everywhere, dropping deep to collect possession, pressing high to win back the ball, creating chances for teammates, and serving as the emotional leader that Alejandro had been. The winning goal came in the 89th minute through a play that perfectly encapsulated everything Diego had learned about soccer. A defensive clearance fell to him just outside the center circle. With tired legs all around him and the clock ticking toward full time, he had to make a decision quickly. Rather than rushing, Diego took a touch to control the ball and lifted his head to survey the field. He saw a teammate making a run down the right flank, but 2 defenders were tracking that movement. He noticed another player calling for the ball in the center, but that pass would likely be intercepted. Then he saw it. The goalkeeper had drifted slightly off his line, anticipating a cross or through ball. Without hesitation, Diego struck the ball with his right foot, sending it arcing high over the defenders and dropping toward the far corner of the goal. The goalkeeper scrambled desperately backward, but the ball dropped under the crossbar and into the net for one of the most spectacular goals anyone in attendance had ever witnessed. The celebration was pandemonium. Diego disappeared under a pile of teammates while the crowd erupted in disbelief and admiration. On the sideline, Coach Hernandez stood with his mouth open, hardly believing what he had just witnessed. In the stands, Roberto and Elena embraced while Carlos pumped his fist and shouted with joy. The victory sent shockwaves through the tournament. A small-town team with limited resources had defeated the defending champions, led by a 12-year-old boy who weighed barely 90 pounds but played with the heart of a giant. The semi-final was another David versus Goliath story, but this time Diego's team was prepared for the pressure and expectation. They played with confidence and composure, controlling the match from the opening whistle and advancing to the final with a comfortable 3-1 victory in which Diego scored once and assisted on the other 2 goals. The championship match was held at the Provincial Stadium, with nearly 5,000 spectators in attendance. For Diego and his teammates, walking onto that field was like stepping into a dream. The grass was perfectly manicured, the lines were sharp and white, and the goals were regulation size with nets that looked like they had never been used. Their opponents in the final were a club team from the capital city, a squad that had won the tournament 3 times in the previous 5 years. They were older, stronger, and more experienced than any team Diego had faced, but he was no longer the uncertain boy who had started the season on the bench. The match was cagey and tactical, with both teams showing tremendous respect for their opponents' abilities. Diego found it difficult to find space in the early going, as the opposing coach had clearly studied video of his performances and designed a specific plan to limit his influence. But great players find ways to impact matches even when things aren't going their way, and Diego demonstrated this quality as the game progressed. Unable to create chances through his usual method of finding space between the lines, he began dropping deeper to collect possession and starting attacks from different areas of the field. The breakthrough came in the 31st minute through a moment of individual brilliance combined with perfect teamwork. Diego received a pass on the left touchline, 30 yards from goal, with 2 defenders immediately closing him down. Using a skill he had practiced thousands of times in his backyard, he flicked the ball over the first defender's head with his left foot and collected it with his right as he accelerated past the second. Now in space, Diego looked up and saw the goalkeeper positioning himself for a cross. Instead, Diego cut inside and unleashed a curling shot with his weaker left foot that bent around the keeper and nestled into the far corner of the net. The goal was a masterpiece of technique and vision, but more importantly, it gave Diego's team the confidence they needed to believe they could win the championship. They defended their lead with discipline and intelligence, with Diego dropping back to help in defensive phases and organizing his teammates with a maturity that belied his age. The final whistle brought scenes of pure jubilation. Diego's teammates lifted him onto their shoulders while confetti rained down from the stands. Roberto and Elena rushed onto the field, tears streaming down their faces as they embraced their son. Carlos, who had sacrificed so much to help his younger brother pursue his dream, stood nearby with a smile that seemed to light up the entire stadium. Coach Hernandez found Diego in the middle of the celebration. "I want you to remember this feeling," he said, placing his hands on the boy's shoulders. "Not because it's the end of something, but because it's the beginning. This is just the start of your journey." The coach's words proved prophetic. Diego's performance in the tournament had caught the attention of scouts from professional clubs throughout the region. Over the following weeks, Roberto's phone rang constantly with calls from coaches and recruiters who wanted to discuss Diego's future. The most intriguing offer came from Club Deportivo Esperanza, a professional team that competed in the country's second division but had a reputation for developing young talent. Their youth academy director, former national team midfielder Raul Mendoza, invited Diego and his family to visit the facility and discuss the possibility of joining their youth program. The academy was unlike anything Diego had ever seen. Training fields were immaculate, the equipment was state-of-the-art, and the coaching staff included former professional players from around the world. But what impressed Diego most was the atmosphere. players of all ages working together, pushing each other to improve, united by their shared passion for the game. "We're not just developing soccer players here," Mendoza explained as he gave the Martinez family a tour of the facilities. "We're developing young men who will represent our club and our community with pride and dignity. Diego has special talent, but more importantly, he has character. That combination is rare." The offer was generous: full scholarship, room and board, access to the best coaching and medical facilities in the region. But it also meant that Diego would have to leave home at age 13, living in dormitories with other academy players and seeing his family only on weekends and holidays. The decision was agonizing for everyone involved. Roberto and Elena wanted what was best for their son, but the thought of him leaving home so young was heartbreaking. Carlos worried about whether Diego was emotionally ready for such a big step. Diego himself was torn between excitement about the opportunity and fear about leaving the family and community that had supported him through every challenge. "What does your heart tell you?" Roberto asked during one of many family discussions about the decision. "My heart says I want to see how far I can go," Diego replied honestly. "But it also says I don't want to leave you, Mama, and Carlos." "Mijo," Elena said gently, "we will always be with you no matter where you are. This opportunity is a gift, not just for you but for our entire family. Your success will be our success, your dreams will be our dreams." After 2 weeks of consideration and prayer, the Martinez family made their decision. Diego would join the Esperanza Academy, beginning a new chapter in his journey toward professional soccer. Transition wasn't easy. Living away from home for the first time, Diego struggled with homesickness and the pressure of competing against players who had been in professional academies for years. Training was more intense than anything he had experienced, the tactical demands more complex, and the expectations higher. But Diego's character, forged through years of overcoming obstacles and setbacks, served him well. He approached each training session with the same smile and determination that had characterized his neighborhood games. He listened carefully to his coaches, studied video of professional matches with the same intensity he had shown with Carlos, and never complained about the sacrifices required to pursue his dream. His first season at the academy was a learning experience. Diego played for the under-15 team de Pitt, being only 13, and while he was often one of the smallest players on the field, his technical ability and soccer intelligence allowed him to compete effectively. He scored 8 goals and registered 12 assists, earning recognition as one of the academy's most promising prospects. More importantly, Diego continued to grow as a person. Living independently taught him responsibility and self-discipline. Training with players from different backgrounds and cultures expanded his worldview. Working with professional coaches refined his understanding of the game's tactical and physical demands. By his second year at the academy, Diego had grown 3 inches and gained 15 pounds of muscle. He was still smaller than most of his peers, but the gap was narrowing, and his improved strength allowed him to compete more effectively in physical battles. His promotion to the under-17 team came as no surprise to anyone who had watched his development. The under-17 team competed in a national league against academies from throughout the country. The level of play was extraordinary, with many games featuring multiple players who would eventually sign professional contracts. Diego thrived in this environment, his creativity and vision providing a unique dimension to his team's attack. In his final year at the academy, Diego was named captain of the under-19 team, an honor that reflected not only his ability on the field but also his leadership qualities and character. He had grown into a young man who commanded respect through his work ethic, professionalism, and unwavering commitment to team success. The culmination of Diego's academy career came during the national championship tournament. Esperanza's under-19 team was considered one of the favorites, with several players already attracting interest from first division clubs. Pressure was immense, but Diego had learned to embrace pressure as an opportunity to demonstrate his growth and development. The tournament unfolded like a fairy tale. Diego's team won their group with 3 convincing victories, advanced through the knockout rounds with displays of tactical sophistication and individual brilliance, and reached the final against the Academy of Real Nacional, the country's most successful professional club. The championship match was held at the National Stadium, with professional scouts, coaches, and media members in attendance. For Diego, walking onto that field represented the culmination of a journey that had begun on a dusty lot behind his family's modest home in San Miguel. The match itself was a classic, featuring 2 teams that represented different philosophies and approaches to the game. Real Nacional relied on size, athleticism, and direct play, while Esperanza emphasized technical skill, tactical intelligence, and creative problem-solving. Diego was everywhere during the first half, dropping deep to collect possession, drifting wide to create overloads, and finding space in the penalty area to threaten goal. His movement and vision opened up spaces for teammates, and his leadership kept the team organized and focused despite the magnitude of the occasion. The breakthrough came in the 38th minute through a piece of play that perfectly illustrated Diego's evolution as a player. Collecting a pass in the center circle, he was immediately pressured by 2 defenders. Instead of trying to beat them with skill moves, he played a simple pass to his right back and then began running toward goal. The movement triggered a sequence of quick passes that carved open the opposing defense. The ball eventually found its way back to Diego on the edge of the penalty area, where he was faced with a decision: shoot for goal or create an opportunity for a teammate who was in a better position. The old Diego might have shot, eager to score the goal that would make him the hero. The mature Diego made the right choice, sliding a perfect pass to his strike partner, who finished cleanly for the opening goal. Esperanza held their lead until the 67th minute, when Real Nacional equalized through a well-taken free kick. The goal came at a crucial moment, with Diego's team beginning to show signs of fatigue and the opposing crowd sensing a shift in momentum. This was the moment when Diego's leadership qualities became most evident. Rather than panicking or trying to do too much, he gathered his teammates together during a brief stoppage in play. "We've been preparing for this moment all season," he told them calmly. "Trust your training, trust your teammates, and trust yourself. We belong here and we're going to win this championship." His words had the desired effect. Esperanza regained their composure and began to create chances again. In the 84th minute, Diego won a corner kick through a clever piece of skill that left the opposing full-back sitting on the turf. Taking the corner himself, Diego delivered a perfectly weighted ball to the near post. The initial header was saved by the goalkeeper, but the rebound fell to Diego's feet 6 yards from goal. With defenders converging and the goalkeeper scrambling to recover, Diego showed the composure that had become his trademark, calmly sliding the ball into the empty net for the championship-winning goal. The celebration was emotional and intense. Diego's teammates mobbed him while confetti rained down from the stands. In the VIP section, Roberto, Elena, and Carlos watched with tears in their eyes, hardly believing that their little boy had achieved something so extraordinary. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came after the trophy ceremony, when Diego spotted his family in the crowd and ran toward them. The embrace that followed encompassed years of sacrifice, dedication, and unwavering belief in the power of dreams. "I'm so proud of you, Mijo," Roberto whispered in his son's ear. "Not because you won a championship, but because of the man you've become." Diego's performance in the championship match and throughout the tournament had caught the attention of several First Division clubs. Within a week of the final, Esperanza's first team offered him a professional contract. Not a development deal or a trial, but a genuine professional contract with a salary that would transform his family's financial situation. The signing ceremony was held at Esperanza's stadium, with local media and club officials in attendance. As Diego put pen to paper, officially becoming a professional soccer player at age 18, he thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. He remembered the dusty field behind his house, the neighborhood games where he was always the smallest player, the hours spent watching videos with Carlos, the patient instruction from Roberto, the support and sacrifice of Elena. He thought about Coach Hernandez, who had given him his first opportunity, and Coach Mendoza, who had helped him develop into a complete player. Most of all, he thought about the smile that had never left his face, even during the most difficult moments. That smile, combined with unwavering determination and the support of people who believed in him, had carried him from a small town where dreams seemed impossible to the threshold of professional soccer. Diego's first season as a professional was everything he had hoped it would be. He made his debut in the fifth match of the season, coming off the bench to help secure a crucial victory. His first goal came 3 weeks later, a curling shot from the edge of the penalty area that reminded longtime fans of the great players they had watched over the years. By the end of his debut season, Diego had established himself as a regular starter and one of the league's most promising young players. His combination of technical skill, tactical intelligence, and leadership qualities made him a favorite among fans and teammates alike. But success on the field was only part of the story. Diego used his platform as a professional player to give back to the community that had supported him. He established a foundation that provided soccer equipment and coaching to underprivileged children, ensuring that other boys and girls would have the opportunities that had been so crucial to his own development. He also remained close to his family, using his earnings to ensure that Roberto could retire from construction work and that Elena could focus on community volunteer activities rather than cleaning houses. Carlos returned to school to complete his education, with Diego's support making it possible for him to pursue his own dreams. As Diego's career progressed, he never forgotten the lessons learned during those early years in San Miguel. The importance of persistence in the face of obstacles. The value of hard work and dedication. Power of believing in yourself when others doubt your abilities. The significance of family, community, and the people who support your dreams. Years later, when Diego had become an established star playing for his national team and competing in international tournaments, he would often return to that dusty field behind his childhood home. He would kick a ball against the same concrete wall, remembering the boy who had once seemed too small, too weak, too disadvantaged to achieve anything significant. But that boy had possessed something that couldn't be measured in height or weight or family income. He had possessed an unshakable belief that dreams were worth pursuing, no matter how impossible they might seem. Combined with the love and support of people who believed in him, that belief had been enough to transform a small-town dreamer into a professional athlete who inspired others to pursue their own impossible dreams. The beautiful game had given Diego everything he had ever wanted, but more importantly, it had taught him that the most meaningful victories are often achieved not against opponents on a field, but against the doubts and limitations that exist within ourselves. His smile, the same one that had carried him through countless challenges and setbacks, remained as bright as ever, a reminder that with enough persistence, determination, and belief, any dream is possible. Final answer: this 18000 plus character story follows Diego Martinez's incredible journey from an underweight, unfocused boy playing with older kids to becoming a professional soccer PLA. Yet, through his unwavering smile, determination, and the support of his family, especially his father Roberto's encouragement and brother Carlos's coaching, Diego overcomes physical limitations and self-doubt. The story chronicles his development from neighborhood games to youth academy success, culminating in a professional contract, while emphasizing themes of persistence, family support, and the power of believing in one's dreams despite seemingly impossible odds.